Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Hi, everyone. You have joined us for our genetics pop-up. We're just giving everybody a moment to come in from the waiting room. So bear with us here. Let me go ahead and get our slides up. Hi, Jen. Good to see you.
Christy, you're muted.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Michaela. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're just waiting here for a few people to come in from the waiting room, but thank you for everyone that's come today. And we'll get started here in just a few minutes. It's like a good crowd forming here today. So thank you to everybody for registering and putting this on your calendar. You see Lourdes has joined us. Hello, Lourdes. If you're looking for the genetics pop-up, you're in the right spot. We are navigating to hope today, hope through understanding of genetics, which I don't know if you can ever understand it all fully, but we're gonna take a crack at understanding some of it today. All right, seems like the waiting room trickle is slowing down, so we'll get ready to get started here in just about 1 minute. Let everybody else that's joining join to the audio. Hopefully everybody's having a good hump day on this Wednesday. Again, if you're just joining us, you are at the Mountain States Regional Genetics Network's Genetics Pop-Up. We are just letting folks in from the waiting room, and we will get started in just a moment here. Thank you for joining us for our Hope Through Understanding pop-up today. And we'll explain what that all means if this is your first time here. Welcome. Hey, Lourdes.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Well, I have that we are just coming up to the top of the hour. So in an interest of staying on time and on track today, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everyone, to our Mountain States Regional Genetics Pop-Up, Hope Through Understanding, today, December 6th, 2023. We are excited to have you here. We have a couple Zoom logistics for those of you who might need the reminder. We're asking everybody to stay in mute if you wouldn't mind during the first part, but we will allow for questions. That's actually a big part of our pop-ups is questions. And you can unmute for the second part if you'd like to ask a question. We ask that you can feel free to turn your camera on if you feel comfortable, or leave it off if you don't. We're actually not streaming live to Facebook today, but we are recording. So just wanted to make that note to those of you for consideration of your camera. You can see the active participation list here in 3, and you can use the chat function here at 4 to either chat myself or Michaela Welch, if you want to give a wave, Michaela, if you have any technical issues or any questions, we can help you there. All right, when we do get to the question part, we are asking that you use the raise hand function because we have a big group here today. So that's under this reactions tab. If you click on that, you'll get the raise hand function to be able to raise your hand to be called on, and then you can unmute or type your question if you feel more comfortable in the chat. This work that we do through Mountain States is funded by HRSA through a grant from the Health Resources Service Administration. If you have any questions about this grant, you can visit hrsa.gov. And we are very thankful for their support of Mountain States Regional Genetics Network and the work that we do through our pop-ups and other programs. Our agenda for today is really just a short one. I'm going to give you an introduction of who Mountain States is and who our genetic navigators are. We're going to do a fun Mentimeter poll. If you haven't ever done one of these before, hopefully you're in for a treat because I think they're a lot of fun to do on the topic of what is hope. We're going to do some questions and answers from our genetic navigators that have joined us today. And then we have some resources to share with you. And then my favorite part of the whole pop-up is to hear your questions. We hope these pop-ups are a place that you feel safe and secure to be able to ask questions about genetics. We do not guarantee that we have all the answers, but we do have a commitment that we will try to help find resources and answers for you on the questions that you have. And so that's the part that I love the most. And hopefully you'll have some questions brewing or have come here today with some questions that you can share in that part. So I am Christy Weiss. I am the projects manager for Mountain States Regional Genetics Network. I came to this work through my own daughter's journey. And today I also want to share with you all who MSRGN is and who the genetic navigators are in the form of a video that we've made. So I'm going to go ahead and play that here, and then we'll get into our Mentimeter poll. Hello, and thank you for a few short minutes of your time. Let me tell you a little bit about the Mountain States Regional Genetics Network. Who is Mountain States Regional Genetics Network, or MSRGN for short, you might ask? MSRGN is a regional network consisting of 8 states: Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and we are funded federally by HRSA that funds the 7 regional genetics networks, which includes MSRGN, along with the Family Center and the National Coordinating Center. The mission of the regional genetics networks is to increase access to genetic services for individuals and their families, including those who are underserved in our region. In 2021, Mountain States Regional Genetics Network selected 8 individuals who had navigated the genetic journey for their own loved ones in their own state. These individuals became our genetic navigators and are now available to help families navigate genetics. Genetic navigators offer resources, guidance, and navigation to others from a perspective of someone who has been there and done that and has been on a genetics path and journey for their own loved ones. Sometimes we all just need a helping hand. The ultimate goal of the program is navigating to hope for families who may be filled with questions, who may be looking for resources, or who may be experiencing barriers to accessing genetic services in their state. Thank you so much for watching that video with us. Hopefully you have a little bit better idea who Mountain States is. And now we're going to switch over to a Mentimeter poll talking about how do you define hope. If you've never done Mentimeter before, I'm going to walk you through it. The best way, I think, is if you have an extra device just sitting around, like your phone or another tablet or something, if you're on a desktop or laptop, is to scan this QR code. with that other device, and it will take you right to the website where you're going to be able to interact with the questions that pop up on the screen. If you're on a phone and you'd like to log on by just, still listening to the call, but opening up your browser, just like you would open up another web page, you can do that. And then in that way, you would just type in www.menti.com. And then it's going to ask you for a code. And the code you would type in is 4283-6231. So there's two ways to join. Again, you can scan the QR code if you have that capability, or you can just, even if you're just on a desktop and you want to just open up another browser or tab like you would open up a website, you just type in menti.com, www.menti.com. And again, that code is 4283-6231. So is anyone having any difficulties with that, or is that working okay for everybody? I'm going to try it just here on my own phone just to make sure it's working. And you should see, if it works properly, you should see the Mountain States logo, and you should see genetics pop up December 2023. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide. Don't worry, I'll have the QR code up. If you haven't caught it, it'll be on the next slide here. So give me just one moment, but we're going to switch over to the Mentimeter slide deck and then go from there. So hopefully everybody's able to join the Mentimeter. And here is the Mentimeter presentation. And again, menti.com and the code 4283-6231. And then this next slide here will have that QR code just one more time. So if you are seeing that and you want to tap the little heart down, if you're seeing it's a heart, I can see the hearts coming through that we've got some folks that are connected. So looks like we're good to go. All right, so this next slide is just a warm-up slide for everyone. If you haven't used Mentimeter before, I always like to throw in a fun question where we can all practice. So this is, what is your favorite holiday food? I'm not specifying it could be any holiday, but go ahead and type in. Oh, I see some words already coming in. Type in your favorite holiday food, and you'll see on the screen a word cloud forming with the responses. And responses that get more than one answer will start to appear bigger. So it looks like we have a couple pumpkin pie eaters here in our group today. Oh, mac and cheese, that sounds good. And mashed potatoes also looks like it's gotten a couple votes there too. So I'll give everybody just a moment to finish up typing in and see all the different yummy foods. So I see tamales on there, prime rib, chocolate pecan pie, anything pumpkin. I vote for that. All right, it looks like it's slowing down now. Great job, everyone, on that practice one. We'll go on to the next slide here. And this is just to get an idea of, have you come to a genetics pop-up before, or is this your first time? So red is, nope, it's my first time. Yellow, not sure, can't remember. And then the green there with the 4 in it, yes, I'm back, and I'm back again. So, oh good, we have quite a few returning, and we have quite a few new folks. Wonderful, let's split half and half right there. Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks for answering this question. Welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. We are glad to have you here. I'll give it just another moment. If you haven't submitted, can tap on that, and looks like that's slowing down. So let's go ahead to the next slide here. This is a fun one, I think, because because we represent 8 states. It's fun to see where everybody else is coming from. So feel free to drop a pin on where you live. If you don't live in our region, that's okay. Just put it like that one that just popped up. Put it kind of wherever you might land. And if the rest of the United States was drawn in there. So looks like we have a couple of folks from outside of our region, and it's looking like we have almost every state represented. Not seeing anyone from Wyoming yet, or Utah, but maybe coming here. And we have, it looks like quite a few from maybe the Midwest, and then maybe some on the West Coast there as well. And quite a few from Montana and Texas today, very well represented. All right, that's a fun one. All right. I still see people coming in from the waiting room, so that's exciting. People are still joining here. All right, so let's get into our question of the day, which is, how do you define hope, or what does the word hope mean to you and your family? And this is going to be a word class or a response type question as well. And this is just a general question, but feel free to just put the first words or phrases that come to your mind as you think about those that question. How do you define hope, or what does the word hope mean to you and your family? Oh, I like that one. Silver linings, future, reassurance, possibilities, joyful. Give everybody a couple more minutes to think about this one, because it's a kind of one of those deep thought questions, I feel like. All right, looks like it's slowing down a little bit. This next form of the question is really specific to genetics, since that's what's bringing us all together here today, is in regards to the topics of either genetic testing, diagnosis, or genetic conditions. What does the word hope mean to you and your family in the context of genetics? Whatever brings you here today. I know we wear lots of different hats, and so you might be here as a family member who is seeking a diagnosis, or one that's been living with a genetic condition for a number of years. So just let us know what that means in the context and the hat that you wear today. I see some words coming through: knowledge, progress, clarity, answers, community. Thank you for responding. That knowledge and answers seem to be popular ones there, still in the middle. Peace, too often missing, greatly need possibilities. Great. Thank you all for sharing these perspectives and aspects. So this last slide, and I apologize, that might have been me making those marks there. I apologize. This topic of our pop-up today is hope through understanding. So this next slide is a little bit different in that it allows you to rate some things on understanding 4 areas. So understanding genetic vocabulary, understanding genetic diagnosis, understanding genetic treatment and care, or understanding support. And then rating it on a scale of how much hope does this aspect specifically give you, but then also on the other scale, how difficult is this to find or obtain understanding on these different topics. So as the responses come in, you'll see them pop up on this graph here and move around based on the 2 axes. So how much hope does this give you? And then how difficult is this to find or obtain? And I know this takes a little bit more thought, because you have to choose it. You have to think about each one of them. So I'll just be quiet for a few minutes and let everybody have a moment to ponder. See those numbers there bunching together and then spreading out. And when I hover over them, it's kind of cool to be able to see everybody's different responses and how they come together as an average of where that dot ends up. So that's kind of cool to look out here and watch those move around too. So it's looking like if we look on the hope scale, it's looking like this understanding genetic support is pretty high on the hope scale, and kind of in the middle on the how difficult to obtain. And then on the how difficult is this to obtain scale there, understanding genetic diagnosis seems like it's higher there on the more difficult to obtain side of things. So it looks like we've got most of you all have responded. So it's kind of neat to look at all these webs of dots and see where they pop up. So hopefully through some of our conversation today and questions and answers, we can provide some thoughts and ideas on understanding genetic diagnoses and understanding genetic support, as well as these vocabulary and treatment care dots here too. All right. And last but not least, this is our last question to wrap up our Mentimeter. What would you like to better understand about genetics today? Whether that's a question that you've come in with, wondering about today, or something that this little exercise here has prompted you to think about. Are there any things specifically or generally that you would like to better understand about genetics today, or any questions that you might have? And this one's not set up as a word cloud, but rather you'll see individual responses pop up for this one. So funding, testing, and care, different types of testing have come in. I actually just got off a very fascinating webinar on different types of testing just a few hours ago for primary care physicians. So testing in general. And then what are the responsibilities of a genetic counselor, and what does the counseling portion look like? That's a great question. What to do when the findings are unclear and where to go? Great question, and actually the topic of our January webinar for primary care providers, but open to families and anyone on this call, called Variants of Uncertain Significance. So you might want to tune in for that. It's going to be on January 29th if you want to mark your calendar for that next webinar. And we should be updating our website soon with the registration. Just getting started learning about genetics, newborn screening and interventions. Funds to cover testing. That one kind of matches this one up here. The better way to approach for services, and some understanding of gene therapy. All really great topics, and probably we could spend a whole pop-up on each one of these, interpreting results. There's another great suggestion. Well, thank you for sharing all these. This really gives us an idea of what people are wondering about today. Hopefully we'll get to touch on some of these. I don't know that we'll have time to do a deep dive into all of these, but this also helps Mountain States as we think about other programs and speakers in the coming months. So thank you for sharing this today. So that is the end of that Mentimeter presentation, and I'm just going to stop sharing and we're going to pop back over to our other slide deck so we can continue on with our pop-up. I'm curious, did everybody like the Mentimeter? Is this your first time? You can put it in the chat if you want. If this is your first time doing that, I think it's a lot of fun. So I see some thumbs up coming through too. So let's see. Here we go. We're going to share a screen here, and we're going to go into our panel discussion with our genetic navigators. So this is a graphic of all of our genetic navigators. They all couldn't be here today, but I see specifically popped up on the screen here, I see Jen from Montana, and I see Lourdes from Texas. And if there's other genetic navigators on, let me know. I see Mariah from Nevada and Tiffany from Utah. So if I've missed anybody, let me know, but we'll go into our questions, and I'll just ask our genetic navigators to unmute your line if you don't mind to answer, and just take turns. So our first question here today is, what is or was the hardest or most confusing part of genetics for you or your family to understand? I have some suggestions here of things that might pop up, but would love to hear from you all. What were the areas that you felt were the hardest or most confusing to understand, since we're talking about understanding genetics today? I see Jen's hand popped up. Go ahead, Jen.
You know, as I was thinking about this, it kind of changed, I think, as I was going through our journey, because initially the vocabulary was very, very overwhelming to me when they sent me the genetic results in the mail. And part of it was that I got those in the mail, so there was nobody to ask those questions to when I opened it. And a lot of the words seemed really scary and hard to understand. And then as we went on, there was other things, but I think being stressed and trying to understand that vocabulary initially was the most confusing part for us.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I can imagine even just the overwhelming feeling of having those results and not having someone to ask questions to about them right away. And so I can imagine reading some of those words and being very intimidated by them. Thanks for sharing. And I see Mariah's hand up. Go ahead, Mariah.
For me, one of the most confusing things, and I think sometimes still is confusing, is that every time that we have genetic testing done, we seem to find new things. And that's always really confusing, trying to explain to family members that, well, how come that didn't show up before? Like, why do you know that now that you didn't know that 3 years ago? It's like your genetics didn't change. So I think just trying to explain and also understand how the testing works and how it's ordered. So, and that's not really very clear from the provider either. So.
Yeah, great point, Mariah. And I think one of the things we've explored through these genetic pop-ups through the years is just how different genetic testing is than all other like blood tests that you would get from your, at your annual physical, right? It's not going to tell you yes or no, you have diabetes with a definitive glucose number or A1C. And it's not going to be a definitive cholesterol number, right? It's much more nuanced, and there's lots of different things to consider when talking about genetic testing, including technology and including discoveries about new genes, right? And things that might not been included in panels prior to, or in interpretation of panels prior to years before. So great point. And I think I saw Lourdes's hand up next. So go ahead, Lourdes. Would you like to answer?
Sure. And for us, for my family, along with the vocabulary and the terminology, it was also understanding the diagnosis itself. Especially since my daughter's condition was extremely rare, leaving us with limited available information. Additionally, comprehending the implication of the diagnosis itself, the appropriate care, potential treatments, and finding the right support were all parts of the genetic journey that posed considerable challenges for us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Lourdes. Did you find with your daughter's diagnosis being so rare that one of your biggest challenges was just even finding any information about it?
Yes, in general, it was finding someone else with the same genetic condition as my daughter. At the time we got the diagnosis, she was number 9 in the world being diagnosed. It doesn't mean that there are not someone else, but diagnosed at that time. And this was 2018, so it's 5 years ago. Now, thanks to the support group that we have formed and to social media, we are more than 120 something diagnosed in the whole world. So it was difficult to find someone.
But now with all of that support and group, it sounds like you found a community and know that you're not alone.
Yes, that is the most important thing for our family and for some of you all also, that when we find our tribe, we know that we are not alone. Yes.
Thanks for sharing, Lourdes. And I see Tiffany's hand up. Tiffany, would you like to answer?
Sure, thanks. So like Lourdes, I had sort of a similar experience. So my daughter is 21 now, but at the time she was diagnosed at birth. Her genetic condition was also fairly rare. There was very little information. And when we had our genetic counseling, I was given a list of 200 potential problems that people with this genetic disorder may experience. And some of these things happen over time. And so but I didn't really connect the idea that there would be co-diagnoses and other things that would come up. And so, there was a little bit of shock. I think my expectations just weren't well managed, and not knowing what questions to ask, because this was all brand new. So I didn't know which questions to ask. And then as things were coming up, it was just this oh my goodness, now a new thing. Oh my goodness, another new thing. Oh my goodness, another new thing. Now after about 20 years, we're just kind of like, okay, yeah, we're just going with the flow now. And we understand that these things will continue to happen and come up. But at the time, I think, I could have benefited from having my expectations managed a little bit better. I think genetic counseling has come a long way, and I think there's much more information about my daughter's particular condition. But I would say that was probably the most challenging thing. But like Lourdes, finding other families, finding other patients has always been really great, and that has been a really positive way for our family to stay social and engaged, and just kind of aware of what's happening with other 22q patients. So that's been really great for us.
Thanks for sharing, Tiffany. And it almost sounds like the understanding part that you wish you would have had was that maybe we don't have all the answers and we don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but to expect some uncertainty as well, right?
Exactly. Yes, the uncertainty. If someone had just said, "Hey, it's going to get crazy before it gets better. Just hold on tight."
Yeah.
that I would have benefited.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I do have a question in the chat, and I think it was something you mentioned earlier. What's an example of something popping up later? Could you give maybe an example from your daughter's past of things that maybe popped up unexpectedly?
Yeah, so for my daughter, she has a microdeletion of the long arm of the 22nd chromosome. So she has 22q11.2 deletion syndrome. And for her, she had a lot of craniofacial anomalies. And so for her, she had a tethered frenulum and a few other things. And she has very small, she's missing the antihelix in her ears. And she has very narrow ear canals. Instead of them being sort of focused down like this, they're more level. So she's experienced a lot of ear infections, and just she's experienced some hearing loss as a result of the infections. And then she developed a tumor that grew into the bone behind her ear. And so she's had to have a portion of her skull removed from the back so that they could remove the cyst. And she's just had, that was very unexpected. And then she's had some cardiac implications. She's had a few cardiac surgeries that we've had to deal with as a result. And these were all things that occurred over time. And for people with 22q, mental and behavioral health issues also become a problem. And so when she was 14, she had a psychotic break, was inpatient for a while we got her psychosis under control. So she's got a plethora of things. She's currently in a facility now. And we're working through that transition now that she's 21. So those are some examples of things that came up after the fact, but they were all very traumatic. They all required major interventions, and so that was difficult. It was pretty challenging, that space between 14 and 18. That was a really dark period, but we came through that, and we're doing really well, I would say now, on the flip side, and having that a better understanding, the mental and behavioral health issues, having a bigger focus on that, because people who have this microdeletion, they're at 35% increased risk for developing psychosis. I didn't understand that initially. I think if I had understood that at the time of diagnosis, I might have been much more cognizant of mental and behavioral health issues. I would have maybe sought. We had a great mental health team. Don't get me wrong. We were supported at the time that she had the psychotic break, but I just didn't understand the gravity of it all. And so, but those are some examples. Maybe I overshared. I don't know.
No, that's okay. We appreciate it. Thank you, Tiffany. All such important things to understand, right? It goes beyond just knowing what the name is of the genetic condition. So I think you illustrated that, with your story today. So I'm going to go to the next question here, which is, what resources, information, things doctors said to you, other families, et cetera, that has been the most helpful in helping you and your family understand genetics, or a specific genetic condition for you or your family, and why? And this is a hard one, because I know from my own journey, I could pick probably 100 resources that have helped, or 100 pieces of advice. But if each person wants to just share maybe one or two of your top things that really helped you all understand genetics. Does anyone want to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Lourdes.
Jen.
Go ahead, Lourdes.
Oh,
Jen.
so as I mentioned in the previous question, so finding that tribe, we find that the Yellow Brick Road project, whose mission is to find a cure and treatment for the mutation that my daughter has, the HNR MPH2. So they have been a invaluable resource for family, connecting with other families who have experienced the similar genetic journeys that we are we're experiencing, and specifically with the same symptoms that my daughter has. Uh, it's like a sense of belonging to a community, sharing and uh, the symptoms that my daughter has, and knowing about the other children. So the first-hand experiences sharing with them, and those ones that they share with us have been invaluable. So it's the support group that we have formed with the Yellow Brick Road. And it's not only the information, it's about the sharing empathy and insights that help us to make the journey more manageable. So it's the support group. It's invaluable information.
And I just
for-
love the name, the Yellow Brick Road. Like you're all going locking arms like Dorothy and headed down to
Yeah.
Yellow Brick Road, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Lourdes. And Jen, I see your hand up. Do you want to share a resource or multiple?
Yeah, well, I think I'm just going to build on what Lourdes said. So my daughter was diagnosed 11 years ago. And at that time, her diagnosis was fairly rare. And the other families were the gateway to the other resources so that you didn't have to find them. Because once you connected to the other families who had a child with your diagnosis, then they could connect you to the resources that they already found. And because they're ahead of you, sometimes depending on your child's age, you're able to get more information about what to expect. And I was thinking about that in light of what Tiffany said. We had a Facebook group for my daughter's condition, and we would post pictures of our kids. And we were actually the group that found some of the symptoms of my child's diagnosis that weren't listed in the literature, because as we were comparing our kids who had the same diagnosis, we were noticing things about our children that hadn't been published in the literature and that now is part of the literature for her diagnosis. So I think that was really helpful too, because it would confirm like, oh yeah, my kid has that, my kid has that, my kid has that, and was really helpful because we could connect each other. The more of us there was, to more resources.
Great illustration. And it sounds like a great research parent partnership as well, right? Really helping to share some new findings for the condition. Yeah, I saw Mariah pop on her camera. Do you have, yeah, go ahead, Mariah.
I was just going to say that my kids were diagnosed with basically 3 different things. Kind of the first thing they were diagnosed with, and then the second thing they were diagnosed with, and then the third thing they were diagnosed with, all many years apart. And each one had its own like whole thing of resources. And like Jen said, it's like you got connected with people who had already been through it and they gave you more resources, and then you didn't have to research anything else. And then they got diagnosed with something else, and then it's like, oh my gosh, like the whole new world and all more stuff and more information. But still, finding families and other people going through it has always been, I think, the most helpful thing.
Yeah, and I think you guys both bring up a beautiful point in that those families saved you a lot of legwork, right? by finding those families.
It's true.
You could spend some less time Googling maybe and digging through support group websites or Facebook files or whatever you were looking for. Yeah, Tiffany, go ahead.
Thanks. I was just going to sort of piggyback on that and the research projects, you know, parents acting as researchers. Given my professional background, the part of the whole reason I ever went back to grad school was because I was so frustrated with the lack of information I could find about my daughter's condition and the resources that were available to parents. And so I went back to grad school, started conducting my own research, and in 2015, I did it was just an online survey that I did through several groups that specialize in 22Q care or provide resources, online resources and things like that for parents. And 106 different families participated in the survey, and they all sent back the survey. And a lot of it was about what social supports do families with children who have these medical conditions, what do they need, what do they want, you know? And I was asking them, where are you going for this information? And by and large, it was social media. Families weren't, you know, they weren't finding resources through their primary care providers. They weren't finding them through special, you know, the SPED programs at school. They were finding them online in Facebook groups, Instagram groups. And then if there are, so for example, with my daughter's condition, there are several organizations that support families who have children with 22Q. And there's an annual day at the zoo, for example. And so you get to connect with lots of families that way. And so everything that Mariah and Lourdes, everything that you've been saying actually was supported by the research I did in 2015. So I think that this is great. I've not participated in one of these pop-ups before, but I'm thrilled to hear that other families, that this is just continuing to be echoed, because I think peer mentorship is huge, especially for parents, when you're just like, holy cow, I don't know what to do or where to go. I have been so grateful on so many occasions for family support, peer support from other moms, other dads. It's been amazing. So I just love this. I guess I'm just saying that I love to hear that this is just being reiterated and that families are having all the same experiences. I love that. It's great to hear.
Thanks for sharing your research, Tiffany, on that topic. And I think I was just going to say it beautifully illustrates why we are here talking to our genetic navigators, because that's the point of having these pop-ups and connecting those of you that are attending to our genetic navigators who are there to be those folks a little bit further ahead on the road, though they might not have had the same experience with the exact same genetic condition. What we've found and heard from many families at Mountain States is that many genetic conditions share some of the same challenges. And so things like trying to get access to certain services might be common to many genetic conditions. And so if you have a family ahead of you that's already figured out how to get access to that specific service or that specific therapy in your state, that can be helpful, as well as all these resources and information that everybody's been talking about and sharing about today. So I am grateful to have all of you genetic navigators here and have this program within Mountain States to be able to offer some of that peer-to-peer support within the overarching umbrella of genetic conditions. So I just have one other question just to wrap up our panel, because I want to make sure we allow some time for some other questions from those who have joined us today. But just maybe a final comment from those of you who want to share on what you feel like makes information understandable about genetics. What are some of the key things that you think about when you've gotten information that's understandable in the genetics field? Are there certain attributes? I'll start off by saying I had just had a conversation the other day with someone about really just honesty and transparency of providers that we worked with, really not sugarcoating things, but also being very honest to say when they don't know something has really helped me be able to take in the information, I think, that we experienced on our journey. So anybody else want to comment? I see Tiffany's hand up. Go ahead, Tiffany.
I was just going to say exactly what you were about to say. You've got to keep the language simple, manage expectations, and be transparent and honest. I am an actively engaged parent. I will do the research. So when a provider would say to me, look, I don't know, this is brand new. This is my first 22Q patient. I have no idea how to treat your newborn. Okay, great. I don't either, but we're going to get there together if you're willing to come with me. And so that I just echo that. It has to be transparent. It has to be honest. And I think one thing that I would encourage all parents is to feel empowered. If you have the question, it should be asked. And I think in a lot of situations, it can become uncomfortable, or nobody wants to look or feel foolish by asking a question. But I have found that when people don't know, when no one knows, even the providers are looking at you going, gosh, I just don't know. I think asking the questions sometimes triggers conversations. Some of the best conversations have come from what I thought would be a really dumb question or a question that might be embarrassing for me to ask. But as a result of asking it, I saw the lights or behind the eyes trigger with my kid's provider. And I was like, yep, we're about to have a really good conversation because I asked what I thought was a dumb question. It wasn't a dumb question. In fact, it led to a really good conversation. Almost always, this is the experience that I have. So just asking the questions, empowering parents to ask questions is huge. And it doesn't matter, just ask the question, because if you have it, I bet another parent has it, or there might be a really good answer after you ask the question. So I always encourage parents to ask the question.
Great advice. Anyone else? Yeah, Jen, go ahead.
I was just thinking, when Tiffany was talking, is like having the information written down. So it's so much information and it's so overwhelming. And so even if it is like in simple language and you understand most of it, you leave and then you have another question, or you want to know what that word was so that you can look it up. And so many times in my appointments, I've asked, like, could you please write that down while they're talking to me, and I'm leaning forward and nobody's writing anything down. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is not, when I get home, this is not going to be good. So I'd say, like, can I get that in writing, you know, when I leave, or could you send it to me so I could check later or follow up with questions? And I think that for me, the way that I learned best and can share information best was to have it written down like that, because then I could also share it with my family and other people that loved my child when I got home. And yeah, because I would forget. I'd be stressed.
Yeah, great suggestion, Jen. And sometimes I know I would take people with me that could help write down. At the time, I was going with a very active toddler who was, you know, who needed my attention, and trying to listen to a practitioner, and then maybe some, you know, students in the room. It got really busy. So having somebody maybe even to help write down, or like you said, ask somebody to write it down for you that is in the room. Yeah, go ahead, Mariah.
Along the lines of what both Jenny and Tiffany said, when the providers are talking to you and telling you something, like we've gone to a lot of specialists, and you might not have a great way to contact that specialist after you leave, after you walk out the door. And sometimes they'll have my chart or whatever, but then that often just goes to one of their nurses who might not ever reach back to the doctor. So I've always tried to make a point of asking, how do I contact you if I have questions after I leave here? Because I know I'm going to think of questions as soon as I walk out the door. And, you know, it's like, and you might not want to wait 6 more months till you see that provider to ask more questions and get more help. So, yeah.
Great suggestion, Mariah. Yeah, asking straight from the horse's mouth, right? How do I contact you? not your staff, not the appointment line, but how do I contact you? Yeah, great suggestion. All right. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to put up how to contact and connect with our genetic navigators. So this slide here has everyone's name on it and which state they represent and their email address. So you can see our email address format is just very simply the state name, the word genetic, @gmail.com. And this will take you right to the person who is serving as a genetic navigator for the states listed. If you are here today from outside of our region, some other regions do have genetic navigators in some of their states. So what I would encourage you to do is reach out to myself. My email is at the bottom there, kweese@mountainstatesgenetics.org. And I would be happy to let you know if the state that you live in has a genetic navigator, or if they don't connect you, then I can connect you to the Regional Genetics Network that covers your state for other resources. But again, as I said, our genetic navigators are here to talk with families. They talk with professionals as well. So if you want to reach out to them as a professional who serves families, they are willing to have those conversations as well. And they are a wealth of resources, as you can hear from their conversation here today, of resources and information to help those who are on a genetic journey. So 2 of the resources I wanted to share just real quickly that are on the Mountain States website that can help with understanding genetic terms is this set of 4 infographics. We call them the genetic recipes. And I'll just ask if Michaela can pop that in the chat. the link there, or you can scan this QR code. We just put up this page with all 4 of them on. We made these in collaboration with our sister region, NIMAC, which is New York Mid-Atlantic Caribbean Regional Genetics Network. And these infographics can be printed, they're PDFs, and they go through some analogies to help understand terms like chromosome and DNA and variants of uncertain significance. And so it's all done under the analogy of baking a cake. So just wanted to point that to your attention. And then also this resource is another resource of tons of genetic information, but also really can help with understanding certain topics. So we've had 3 genetic summits that have been virtual over the last 3 years, and those are all archived here. We just had our last one in October, and you can watch 12 different sessions from each genetic summit year on various genetic topics. And so we've had ones on autism, on Down syndrome, so ones that are specific, but then we've had ones on sharing a diagnosis with hope, or what genetics looks like for Native American populations. So very, very vast topics in genetics that I would really encourage you to take a look at this library again, either through this QR code, or I'll just ask Michaela if she wouldn't mind putting the link to that Genetic Summit library in the chat. All right, it is time. It's finally time for your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everybody's faces. And I'm going to just check the chat here and see if any questions have come in. I do see one came in here. How do you become a genetic navigator? Great question. Our genetic navigators applied to these positions, and then Mountain States has developed a genetic navigator training program, about a 6-hour program that all our genetic navigators are trained in, and then are paid by a stipend to be in this role for Mountain States. In other regions, it looks a little bit different, but I'm happy to have a conversation with the person who asked that question offline if they'd like to ask some more questions about the genetic navigator program. I will start off by just saying, if you have a question today and you want to type it in the chat, that's perfectly fine. If you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand. And just a reminder, that's under the little smiley face with the plus beside it that says reactions on your Zoom bar there. And then if you click on that, there's a raise hand function. So if you'd like to unmute your line and ask a question from our panel today, please raise your hand and let us know, or feel free to put a question in the chat as well. I'll give everybody a moment to think about their questions here. I'll just ask our panel, do you all want to ask any questions of one another? On understanding genetics. I think, like I said, I think we could be here all day talking about it. I'm thinking about some of the questions that came up in our Mentimeter as well. So I think I'm going to switch back over there. And as people are thinking of their questions, maybe we can talk about a couple of those Mentimeter questions. Give me just a second here. There we go. So one of the questions that had come up there was about funding testing. And I think that's one that as genetic navigators, we hear a lot about, is funding testing, and how do you get a genetic test paid for? And how do you understand that process? So does anyone want to talk with that? If not, I can start and just say that we have found a great resource through the Plugs website, and I will get that link up here momentarily after I look at it. That is a user guide, a family guide to how to get some more advanced testing paid for, and talks about appeals processes and things like that. And we are working on giving some feedback to Plugs for their next version of their toolkit for families. But would any of our other genetic navigators like to talk about that how do you get stuff paid for question that we had come up in the Mentimeter? Go ahead, Mariah.
I would say if you have a genetic diagnosis already and you're looking for further testing or something, check out some of the different organizations for that specific diagnosis. I know, like for mitochondrial disease, I know of a couple organizations that do help pay for out-of-pocket medical expenses, and that can be one of them. And so I don't know if, I'm sure that those kinds of things exist for other conditions. If you don't yet have a diagnosis, though, that's, I don't know. But I know if you already have a diagnosis, I know there are a couple that can help.
Great, thank you. If there's a couple, Mariah, that you'd like to pop in the chat, feel free. I'm just sharing my screen here just to show everybody what I was talking about with the plugs. PLUG stands for Patient-Centered Laboratory Utilization Guidance Services. It's out of Seattle Children's Hospital, and they have a toolkit, complex lab test, how to get them covered, and they have it in English and Spanish. So you can just click the link I put in the chat, and then you can download it in English and Spanish. So I just wanted to share that resource for those asking about getting coverage for tests. And I saw Jen's hand up. Go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say that sometimes labs or other organizations, other corporate groups that are involved in genetic testing will offer like a cash price or a payment plan. You know, and sometimes you just have to ask, because the people that are ordering the genetic tests have heard probably about the different ways that families have been paying for them, but they probably don't think to say to every family, now, if that's a problem for you to pay for this, here's some ideas. And so, you know, asking the provider, they may have some ideas, but so might the lab that your test is being sent to, if you can find out where that's being sent. And if you're in Montana, our Children's Special Health Services actually has a program that helps pay for genetic testing for families in Montana.
Great reminder about the state resources as well. And thank you for that, Jen. And I did see a question that had come through from our Mentimeter about gene therapy. So that has been a topic that Mountain States has explored over the years. One of the early ways we explored that is it came up as one of our top questions in a family survey we did in the last grant cycle for a series we called Your Genetic Questions Answered. And we did videos, Facebook Lives on answering some of individuals most asked questions that we got at Mountain States. And so I just put a link to that series. It's a series of 12 videos. The page will talk everything from autism to mitochondria to MTHFR gene to there is one specifically on gene therapy. So I might start there if you're looking at understanding that a little bit better. And then in our 2021 Genetics Summit, our very first speaker, Dr. Brendan Lee from Baylor College of Medicine, gave what I thought was a very excellent overview of gene therapy and all the different platforms. And it was right at the time that the vaccine was coming out, the mRNA vaccine. And so he covered that as well. So I would highly encourage you to take a look at that recording that is up for Dr. Brendan Lee. It's the 2021 Connect the Dots Genetics Summit if you're looking for more information on that topic of gene therapy. Well, we have a quiet bunch today. I'm not seeing any takers for questions. I'm not seeing any more here in the chat. So I'll keep going with the Mentimeter, but please feel free to raise your hand and speak up if you do have a question today, and or put it in the chat so we can address that. So one of the other questions that had come up that people were wanting to understand about genetics on our Mentimeter poll was different types of testing and understanding that. And I have to say, as I said, I think I mentioned as those results were coming through, that there was a great talk today that I just attended for primary care providers, and this was a topic of what kind of genetic tests were out there. So I'm just seeing if I took a screenshot of it to be able to share with you all. Yeah, I think I did. Okay, let me see if I can open this up. Hopefully they won't mind me sharing it. Let's see. This again was for primary care providers. It was not a family audience, so this might be a little bit of a technical side, but this came from our sister region, Nurgen, has a genetics and primary care series going on that kicked off today. It's every month they'll be having a topic for primary care providers. So if you are with a primary care provider or pediatrician right now and you're feeling like you need some assistance in talking about genetics with your primary care provider, this series might be a great one. They are offering CME for it. So this is the slide though that they shared today about the different types of genetic variation and testing. And so in the center column here are all the different types of tests, from sequencing single genes to whole exome sequencing, whole genome sequencing, and then the types of variations in genetic information that come out of that. And so as you can see, I'm just sharing this not to deep dive into this today, but really to just show you that there's so many types of genetic testing out there that it can be quite dizzying to understand it all. And really what we encourage at Mountain States is that you are with a primary care provider and that you do seek assistance from genetics professionals that you have available, whether that be a geneticist or a genetic counselor that might be able to help you understand or make sense of some of this dizzying sometimes information. I often think that genetics is a bit of an alphabet soup, literally, with all the different types and names of genetic tests as well. Go ahead, Jen.
I don't have it right at my fingertips, but you might, the number for that they can call to talk to someone about genetics. I always want to say the wrong organization for that one, but I think
I think you're referring to GUARD.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. Let me pull that website up. The great suggestion. So that's located at the National Institutes of Health. There is an organization or a division called GUARD. It stands for Genetic and Rare Disease Information Center. And the number that Jen was talking about is right up here in the right-hand corner. It says questions about rare disease. And when they say rare disease, that's a little bit of a broader term than a genetic condition, but about 70 to 80% of rare diseases are caused by a genetic condition. So that's genetics falls under this umbrella. And so their phone number is 1-888-205-2311. They also have other ways you can contact them. Like we said, by phone. They also have a contact form on their website. And then they also are a searchable database. So they have browse by disease. So if you have a specific diagnosis and you want to learn more about that, you can type that in here to the GUARD database. And I am seeing, hang on, let me stop sharing my screen so I can see. I'm seeing that Lindsay raised her hand. Lindsay, did you want to chat or unmute your line to ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. So, hey guys, I'm currently studying at A&M in hopes to go into genetics and maybe doing some kind of genetic counseling. So I just kind of have some questions about like people's past relationships with their providers, just kind of stuff like that. Typically, are you with the same provider throughout like your whole journey through figuring out your diagnosis, or do you kind of flip back and forth? Is it a one-time thing? Like, kind of what are the basics of that relationship?
That's a great question. And did you want to know specifically about a geneticist or specifically relationship with a genetic counselor? Did you say you're wanting to go into genetic counseling? Did I hear you say that?
Yes, ma'am. Genetic counseling.
Genetic counseling. Okay. So if anybody's had experience with genetic counseling and wants to explain, yeah, go ahead, Jen. I see your hand up.
I was going to say, in Montana, we've had from 0 to 1 genetic counselor, and I think now we're going to start having 2. And we would have not genetic counselors, geneticists, and we would have people rotate in and out, and they would rotate people in to look at cases too where they hadn't been able to figure out a diagnosis. So I think we met with a different geneticist probably every year, and sometimes the same genetic counselor, but those would also rotate too. So I think a lot of places that are rural and frontier and people that have to often end out with a rotating group of people, especially if they're having a struggle to figure out what your child has, they sometimes want to bring in another set of eyes. So that was our experience with genetics in Montana.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Jen. And just in the interest of time, I'm just realizing that we're going to need to wrap up. We're about 1 minute till, but I'm just so thankful for all of you being here today, both the genetic navigators as well as those of you who attended today. We do have an evaluation survey. If you would take a moment to do that, we're going to pop it in the chat for you, just to let us know if this was helpful, if you learned something today, if this is helpful information to you. So Michaela's popped that in the chat. If you don't mind taking that, clicking on that link and taking that survey, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. And then just as a reminder, if you want to get in touch with any of our genetic navigators, they are not all here today. So if your state's not represented by someone on the screen, they are available by email. And this information is all on our website under For Families tab and the Genetic Navigator page. And then last but not least, I just want to ask everybody to save the date of February 22nd. We love Rare Disease Day around Mountain States, and it's traditionally our time that we do our genetics pop-ups every year. And with this being our last genetics pop-up for this grant cycle, we just want to invite everybody to our big celebration of our genetics pop-up that we're going to have on February 22nd, which will be Hope Through Support. So hope to see everybody at that one. And if you would like to stay in touch with us, feel free to sign up on our mailing list to get updates on when that pop-up is, and the link to the registration. This QR code will take you to a quick 60-second form that you can fill out to get on our list. But thank you again for everyone attending. I'll hang on here for a second if anyone has any last-minute burning questions or needs any information. But with that, we will end the pop-up for today and just thank you for attending. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.